Valheim gives us the ability to build incredible things, but for those new to building, most of us probably start out with something simple, like this. So how do we make it better? Hey everyone, my name is Smitty, and today I'm going to show you 5 easy tips and techniques to enhance your Valheim builds. We'll be applying these simple concepts to take this starter home from simple to advanced. Hope you all enjoy, and without further ado, grab a snack, grab a drink, and let's get right into it. For some of you new Valheim players and some of you aspiring builders, you may start out playing the game and your first build may look something like this. So probably just your basic starter home, pretty standard structure. Certainly does the trick, but could certainly be upgraded to look a little bit better. So this specific plot is, I believe, 12 meters by 10 meters, and then it goes 4 meters up with 45-degree angled roofs. So maybe you get this far and you want to upgrade it, but you just don't really know how to go about it. And so that's what I'm going to cover in this video today. Just a couple of tips and tricks that I would do to go about upgrading this structure to look a little bit better. Alright, so the first thing I would say we should do to improve this structure is to create overhangs with our roof. So as we can see, the roof just comes up to the wall here, but doesn't extend past it. And that just creates a very flat feeling to the build, which I don't like. So the first thing we're going to do is going to extend this thing out. One thing I'm always cognizant of when I create roof overhangs as well is ensuring that there's enough clearance underneath. So usually I want to have at least 2 meters here so you can still walk under it, but ideally I like to have 3 meters. So that's going to create a little bit of an issue here with this structure. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to increase this by 1 meter up and stick with the 45-degree beams, because that way when I bring it down this far I will have 3 meters of clearance. I think that'll just look a little bit better and it won't obscure the window quite as much. So we'll just go ahead and do that real quick. Alright, so I've taken out all the beams here, and now I'm just going to raise them up just an extra meter, just to give myself a little bit more space. Alright, I'll bring the beams down this way. Same for the other side here. And then we'll just fill it in with, again, the 45-degree thatch roof. Alright, so we've extended the roofs out on 2 of the faces here, and you can kind of immediately see how this just adds a little bit of depth to the sides, and just makes it look a lot better in my opinion. So we'll do a similar thing on this side here, where we'll extend it out just so there's a bit of an overhang in the front as well, because as we can see, there is a very large flat face just on this side, so we want to get rid of that. So what we'll do here, just extend it out with some beams, and then we will just attach another layer of 45-degree thatch roof pieces. And then we'll just line it with wood beams just so it looks a little bit more polished here. Alright, and so with that, we can see the immediate impact that pulling out the roof has had. As we can see, it does a good job of breaking up these flat faces that we had before, and it really adds a nice sense of depth to the structure. I think it was also a good idea to increase the clearance to 3 meters, just so we didn't obscure the walls here. But again, this is one of the first things I do when building a structure, is just ensuring that I have a good bit of depth to my roof, because I think it just looks much better than what we had before. So the next thing I might consider when thinking about improving this structure is creating dormer windows. So sticking with the theme of the roof I have here, if I look at this plane, it's pretty large and pretty flat, and so it might be necessary to actually break this up a little bit. And so what I like to do is add what's called dormer windows, which are these elevated window segments which help break up these flat areas of roof. So what I might do here is break out a segment of the roof here, and then build up vertically to try to create what's called a dormer. So we'll stick with the 45 degrees here. We'll line it out with some beams. And then this should connect directly into here. And then we'll fill it out with some roof pieces. So, and then these corners here, we'll use the internal corner pieces just so it blends nicely with the rest of the roof. And then we'll just fill these in with some of the wall pieces. Maybe we'll build it up like that. Alright, yeah, so I think that works out nicely. I don't always add dormer segments to my roof, but in certain instances I think it does look nice and does break up some of the flatter, larger areas of roof. And just as a good technique to kind of have in your toolkit to, you know, add to some structures and give some personality to your roof. Alright, so the next thing I would consider doing here is adding some trim and details to my roof lines. So this isn't necessarily required, but I like doing it sometimes just to make it pop a little bit. So for instance, maybe I go here on this side, and we will flatten these out with some floor pieces. So we'll pull it out like that, and then maybe we will also bring in some wood beams. So yeah, totally optional. Certainly don't need to do this, but I think it's a nice way to add some detail if you do have some extra resources to invest into the roof lines. So let's go ahead and do this on the other side as well. Alright, yeah, so in this case I do like that. Again, just adds a little bit more detail to my roof lines and just pulls out a little bit more, just creating a little bit more depth. So another thing I'll do to add some detail to the trim is I might add some segments where the wood beams are sticking out. So maybe I'll add them here. So we could just leave it like this, and that's probably totally okay with most people, but in my opinion, I think that these beams as is stick out just a little bit too much. So 1 meter is a little bit too much, and I'd like to cut that down to 1/2 meter. So what I will actually do here is I will actually go over this again with another layer of the 45-degree beams and just try to mash this up as best as I can. And then just go over it again with another layer. And what that will do, again, it'll just cut down this to a 1/2 meter segment, which I like a little bit more. But again, just adds a little bit more depth and detail to the trim. Makes the roof line pop just a little bit. Alright, awesome. So with the roof done, I'm going to move on to the walls. And I'd say that walls are some of the more commonly neglected areas of builds in Valheim. I feel like a lot of times I see that they're just left flat. And so there's a couple different techniques that you can do to try to add some depth and detail to walls. So one of the first things I like to do is actually pull out the structural frames of my structure to try to give a greater sense of depth to the wall. And so when you're working on walls, you kind of want to envision it as multiple layers. So maybe you have a base layer, and then you'll have a layer that's kind of framed around it. So I'll give an example of what this means. Let's just real quick close this up a little bit since we did raise our roof. So we'll just adjust this. Alright, so pulling out the frames. And so what I mean by this is, as you can see, there's certain structural holes and beams throughout this structure, but they all sit flat to the wall. Like, they're not very well highlighted or accentuated in the structure. And so what I actually like to do is pull those out with another layer. So I will actually, while also pulling it out, I'm going to make it look a little bit thicker by doubling up the beams. And so I'll bring this all the way up. And then from there, again, I'm just going to follow the structural lines that I had established with my beams. And just pull this all the way across. So maybe on the sides here, and go like this. Just increase the size of them. Also pull them out a little bit. Alright, and so hopefully what you're starting to see is through doing this, we are establishing a base layer and then a kind of like an accent layer here where we pull out and highlight some of the beams. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick all the way around. Okay, and so with that, as you can see, I pulled out a lot of the structural framing to create depth on the different segments of walls here. So it is a subtle technique, but I do think it really helps establish a bit of relief or depth on the wall, which is really important, and it just makes it look a little more visually appealing to look at. So from here, the next thing that we need to do is we need to frame the window and wall sections that we have created. So as you can see, we have different sections of windows and walls. And although we've created depth with pulling out the structural components, we can also pull out the framing of these different sections just to add a little more depth and relief to it as well. So for instance, why don't you can pull out the frames here. Another thing I like to do is you could actually use the thatched roof ridges to add some awnings to your windows. So that might work. It's all a bit of an experiment. You can use different pieces, use different techniques, whatever looks good. Try to add some depth and detail to these different segments. So maybe we'll pull this down. Pull that down here. And it's all about, just, again, framing these different areas. Another thing I like to do is use maybe the wood floors here. Just kind of custom place them here to kind of create some windowsills. It's important to use some different pieces just to give a little bit more variance. Maybe we'll just tuck some of these in here as well. So yeah, just things, again, that create depth. So maybe throw in some wood beams here. And maybe I want to have some wood beams sticking out here on my structure as well. Let's pull those out. So that works. Again, just adding a little bit of depth to these different sections here. Another thing you can do, you know, we talked about pulling out to add depth. You can also take away. So if I want to add some depth here, maybe I remove this section, push it back, right? And so from here, maybe we'll just do something similar to all these different segments here. So just custom place here so it doesn't snap. And I guess for clarification, when I say custom placing, I'm holding shift just to make sure that it doesn't hit this, do the snap, and I can actually just place it wherever I want. So maybe we'll pull this down like we did for the other one. And then we'll slide in some of these roof ridges as awnings. Alright, so I'm real quick just gonna kind of follow that pattern and continue that all the way around here. Alright, so as we can see, I pull out all the different window sections and just frame them a little bit better. But it does add a nice bit of depth to it so it doesn't sit as flat to the wall. As you can see, we do have some wall sections here that could be filled in, so maybe we'll just keep this simple. Too crazy here. Just frame it in a different way, so maybe just something like that. We'll do the same on the other side here. But, alright, yep. So that looks okay, but again, as you can see, we really kind of established two layers to our wall. The base layer, and then the layer we use to kind of accentuate with some detail and depth. So you always want to keep that in mind. You don't want to just be one-dimensional with your walls. You always should work with multiple layers if you're trying to make them look good. Alright guys, so there you have it. So as you can see, this structure has been upgraded quite significantly from where we started. So you may have noticed a theme that everything we did here added a lot of depth and detail to it. So in the beginning it started off pretty flat and uninteresting, but by adding things like overhangs and doing things with the trim and adding dormers, you just make the structure much more interesting. So from here, all you gotta do is decorate it how you want, but I feel like the decoration component is a little bit easier, so you could add things like banners, vines, if you like using the plant everything mod, but you know, not everyone understands the idea of creating depth, so hopefully you guys found this helpful. We have obviously applied this to a starter build, but the same theory applies if you're working on a castle or a big mansion. You just want to ensure that you don't leave areas flat and you continue to make them interesting by adding depth. But anyway, hope you guys found this helpful, particularly for some of you beginners who maybe are new to building in Valheim. If you did, please make sure you like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks.